welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to those of you who are joining us online. Today is Monday, March 28th, 2022, and this is the Utah League of Cities and Towns Board of Directors meeting. It is a privilege to welcome all of you here to the Public Safety Building at South Jordan City. This building is a couple years old. We dedicated it in 2018, which is the first year that I served as mayor here. That was when we dedicated this building, and we were able to move our courts and our police here and our fire administration here. We were considering having this at our new fire station, which is west of here, Station 64, but weren't sure how far off of I-15 any of you had time to drive. But I want you to give me your word that you will come back sometime and see it, and then you'll get a bird's eye view for the growth and the realities of what we are experiencing here in South Jordan. They did this before I came, and we did a bond for the new one. And yes, there was, but it was a, Ryan, tell me everything how this was worked out, this building. I'm like, it's before my time. There was, but yeah. I don't know what it cost, 15-ish. Those were the days, yeah. Yeah. And then we did a new one for our Station 64. Yes. And yes, if you have projects like that, my only bit of advice would be that when you are securing your contracts, to make sure that there is a fail-safe in there should the contractor default. We were able to have that on our Station 64. We didn't need that on this. It's rare that it happens, but the insurance that goes along with that guarantees that your price is set and that the insured, the insurance will have to find a new contractor, and that your price is cemented regardless of what happens. That did happen on our Station 64. The developer had another big project they were working on that they didn't get paid for, and they ended up folding. And it put us about 6 months off schedule, but we were able to secure the price that we had already established that was in the contract. So that would be my 2 cents worth of advice, is to kind of make sure that those fail-safe clauses are in there, because as rare as they are, when they happen, it would have cost us a fortune. We would have been just up a creek if we didn't have that in place. So just best practices, the kind of thing that you don't think will ever happen, there's a reason that they're in there. So just be mindful of that as you're going about projects like that, because it can happen. I was asked to just really super quickly give a little bit of a heads up about South Jordan. So we have the longest linear boundary of any city in the state. We go from, if you look out that window, you can see Kennecott's mine. You can see the copper mine. You can see the flat topped tiered mountain with the copper running down the outside of it. That would be Rio Tinto's land, and that would be the copper mine. We go all the way from U111, which is the road that runs right along their property, to I-15. We don't stop at the Jordan River boundary. We go to I-15. We have somewhere upwards, just over 85,000 residents right now. I can't give you a firm number because it goes up every single day. Every day it changes. So last count, a couple months ago, we were at about 85,000. And so that will continue to go up. We have a lot of growth left to still happen. We've got quite a bit of growth left to happen. And so the census actually came out and said of cities. Now, I almost hesitate to say this because so many of you have fast growing cities. That's just a reality that we face here in the state of Utah. But the census, the federal census said out of cities above 50,000 residents, South Jordan's one of the 10 fastest growing in America. And that comes with some challenges. That's not always something you want to be, right? Because it's not easy to keep up with, and it's a lot to try to stay ahead of. That being the case, we're working very hard to make sure to plan and have the right vision to ensure that we have infrastructure and adequate planning and everything in place so that the quality of life people have moved here for, just like all of you, they're able to maintain as more people move here for that quality of life. We are home to Bingham High School, and also kind of Harriman High School. It is right on our boundary and it's right across the street from our boundary. But Harriman High School is located in Harriman, but 3/4 of the students who attend live in South Jordan. So it's also one of our feeder high schools. And then we have some charter and some private high schools as well here in our city. What else? What can I tell you? We just have a lot going on. There's a lot going on. Daybreak. Any of you who are familiar with the beautiful Daybreak community, it is not its own city. It's not its own town. Daybreak is a master plan community in South Jordan City. And we love our friends in Daybreak. The Miller Group purchased Daybreak and they continue to grow and to build. And by the time that's built out, it will really make up about half of the boundary that we have here in South Jordan. We work really closely with our friends to the north and to the south and all around us. You know, we've got fast growing communities all over this area. This whole quadrant of the valley is just really growing quickly. So we work really closely with the other communities out here in West Jordan and Harriman, and Riverton, Bluffdale, Draper, Sandy. There's just a lot of growth out here, but the Southwest area really specifically, and then also Draper. Sandy continues to grow, but not quite at the same rate. So it's a privilege to be here with all of you, and I want to thank you for your service that you give to this league board. It is no small task trying to represent the cities in your area, the communities that you represent, because we all have diverse needs and there are unique circumstances. We've got a lot of areas that have a lot of new growth, but we also have a lot of areas that need some new money come in, that are looking at projects similar to what Mill Creek's doing, right? A lot of great opportunities to bring some new things to communities that have existed longer and have some infrastructure that can now be replaced. There's a lot going on and we're all different, but we're all similar. Thank you for bringing your voices and your expertise to the table, because we've got big things to keep working on and tackling. And honestly, as I look around the room, I just can't imagine working with a better group. You guys really are fantastic. And I appreciate you being here and all of you who traveled to be here. Thank you. Okay. We have a couple of new people here that I want to welcome officially here in person really quickly. We have Kaysville Mayor Tran here with us in person, who's new to this board, and Marcia White from the Ogden City Council. Thank you for being here. They were both appointed in January. We just very much appreciate you being here with us, and thanks for coming. And we have other board members who were appointed last fall who have been with us before, but this is the first time we've had this many of us all together at a board meeting for sure. So thank you all. And those of you who couldn't be here with us in person, we miss you, but we appreciate your service and thank you for being here electronically. A very quick recap. How many people here went to the National League of Cities conference? So see, we've got a lot of people here who can kind of weigh in on this. I think it was a really good conference and it was an eye opener for me. Our city had never gone and I'd not been there, but nobody from South Jordan had ever gone. And I felt like it was worth going. I mean, and please, if you disagree and feel like that wasn't the case, I'd love to know, but I felt like it was worth going. I felt like there was value in being there. And I think we had a really good turnout from Utah. There were nearly 100 of us from Utah that went. If I might, I'm just going to kind of throw it out there to those of you who went and ask if any of you want to weigh in and just tell us what something was that you felt like was valuable being there. Go ahead. Thank you.
Workshops are good. We have some phenomenal discussions with all cities council, which is anybody under 50,000. Good conversations, which is always fun because we look at ourselves in Utah and say, okay, this is what we're facing, and it's the size of our city. And it's interesting.
Thank you. Anybody else? First timers, new people, returners? Anybody? Kate?
There, Ramsey.
Yes.
We cannot hear anybody other than you on the online stuff.
Okay, we'll pass the mic around.
Yeah, we know we've got AV people who are working on it. I've been texting with a couple of board members. There should be other mics.
Push the green button and they should start to work and they'll pick you up. If there's not one next to you, just move it to where you're
Perfect.
speaking.
Okay, so Ryan, will you? Yeah, Brian, will you test that?
Go ahead.
Are you able to hear any better now?
Right here.
If hear me any better, because I'm near this mic here. Yeah.
I can hear a few more people now, so maybe that's working.
How about now?
Yep.
Good.
All right, well, now I'll share my awesome insight into the conference. You know, I always think the unstructured hangout time, the opportunity to get to know your colleagues better is wonderful. Because of the fun on homelessness this session, I made sure that my colleagues from Bountiful that were there, we all attended a homelessness workshop together so that we could have some of the discussions I know others of you have been having for a lot longer. And then I thought the most impactful presentation was actually the speech from the mayor of Lviv, Ukraine, and listening to that appeal and thinking about how what he is doing and what so many other mayors are doing is so different from the day-to-day that we do. I thought that was a really powerful insight, and then to follow it up by being at the Capitol as our delegation finished up hearing from President Zelensky was a really interesting pause from thinking about growth and drought and homelessness and things like that.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to add?
Just thank you to those who came. We did have more than 90 Utahns attend, which is a record number. When I first started the league, the Utah League was not really engaged with NLC. So a handful of people would go, but we didn't really have any formal events. And so it was exciting to stand before the state night, to have 90 plus Utahns there from a wide variety of communities, and it was awesome. And so it's expensive, it's time consuming. We recognize that not every city is going to be in a position to send people to Washington, D.C., but the time with the delegation was very worthwhile. And as Councilmember McCain referenced, the networking time between people was terrific as well. So thank you to everybody who came, and we will continue to host state night and our annual brunch and see if we can keep those numbers up.
Okay, moving on. And this just feels like it's right in my face, and I'm sure it looks like it is too, but they can't hear me online without it. So anyway, in this setting, I don't need a microphone. You guys, you'd be able to hear me just fine, but it's just for our friends online. We sent out the minutes. The minutes were sent out from our January 19th, 2022 meeting. Anybody had a chance to review those? Are there any questions or amendments to the meeting?
There's one change we found after sending it out that we will need. There's one change we found after sending it out that we'll need to make, and that is to remove an old board member, Council Member Clint Smith, and add, who was their first board meeting, Mayor Mike Lenhart for Garden City.
Okay. Thank you for that.
With that change, Jeff Silverstone, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the minutes with that change of removing the name of Councilmember Smith from Harriman and adding Mayor Lenhart from Garden City. We have a second by Mayor Kafusi. Any additional discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the minutes from January 19th, 2022 with amendments as stated, please say aye. Any
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
Okay, those minutes are approved. Thank you. All right, we have some board and commission reports and appointments. We're going to turn it to Liam Threlkill, our legislative research analyst, and Nick Jarvis, our chief operating officer. for this report. Where's Liam? Right here.
I'm over here. Okay, awesome. Alrighty, so we have quite a few vacancies currently in existing boards and commissions and then new boards and commissions that were created this session. In my memo that I wrote, I think, oh yeah, Nick has it pulled up there. That outlines what we have available right now or what's open. There are some requirements that come with each of those. Some of them are based on like geography or other needs, but we have quite a few open there. We will be getting the official list of everything that we need to fill from the governor's office on April 1st. So I'll have more official information then to share, but wanted to share this with you guys so that we can get these filled by the April board meeting. So if you're interested in any of these boards and commissions, or you know of anyone that would be a good fit, if you could reach out to me either at my email or my cell phone or whatever works for you, grabbing me after this and letting me know, that would be super helpful.
We also would just like to make another, some more outreach for members to join our Finance and Audit Committee. That is chaired by our treasurer, Mayor Hales. And we will just need a couple more folks on there, the folks we had before left the board. We will be going out to bid for our audit this year. For the state auditor's office, requirement recommendation is to go to bid at least every 5 years, and we're right on that point. So we're going to be doing that for the first time under this administration. So we will want to bring people who respond to that RFP. We'll want to bring it to the Finance and Audit Committee to make a decision on that, to bring to the board to ratify. So if you're interested in serving on that, throughout, other than every 5 years when we do that, the Finance and Audit Committee will essentially looks over our finances, gets the quarterly reports before we send them off to the full boarding. So there's one chance of review there. And yeah, just let me know. You can let me know now if you're interested. You can shoot me an email afterwards. And if I don't hear anything soon, I'll just be running after people who I think would do a good job there. So thank you.
Well, you're going to want to sign up fast. I mean, people are going to be beating down the door for the Finance and Audit Committee, which, no, really, we truly appreciate those that serve. And if anybody's interested, we'd love to have you do that and appreciate your service. Thank you. I feel bad I didn't turn online to Mayor Mendenhall, or who else do we have on there? Who attended the, I can't see a full list of who's there. Gary Hill, who attended NLC, to see if you had anything you wanted to share.
Thanks, Mayor Ramsey. I would add that, as everyone has said, we had the biggest turnout we've ever had, and being together was really effective. But I also think the delegation took note of the sense of importance and urgency that the cities were bringing to our conversations with them. And I encourage you all to join. We didn't have the microphone, but I saw my friend from Clearfield talking, and I hope he was talking about his representation through youth city government. That was inspiring to me, to have our youth city government be able to attend NLC with us next year. So thanks for being a leader there. But come out to show how strong cities are in the state of Utah, not just with our delegation, but with the White House as well. They were in attendance, and they were meeting with cities. We had a chance to sit down with them and talk about what the rescue plan dollars are doing in our city. So anyway, I think we had a great showing, and I hope to see that kind of momentum next year as well.
Thank you, Mayor. Salt Lake City had their entire council there, right? Yes. Yep, that was a really good, strong showing. Thank you. Gary, did you have anything you wanted to add from Bountiful's perspective, or a staff perspective, or?
No, I think it's been said. Just great to spend time with everyone. Great to show that Bountiful cities, that Utah cities are united. And Bountiful's part of that.
Next year, there will be a bill to rename all cities Bountiful. Yeah, I love that. No, thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks.
Okay. All right, moving on to item 4. We have our financial report from Q2 of fiscal year 22 and the check register. We're going to turn it over to Nick to kind of go over that for us. And we have hard copies if you don't have access to your digital board packet. We've got hard copies of that available.
Maybe. I'll be done after this one, so we should be good. But yeah, apologies. It's a little different setup than I'm used to running the machine here and then presenting this. Very briefly, just want to go through what we're calling our Q2 plus financial report. This covers July 2021 through February of this year. You all have the memo and the numbers in your packets. A few of the highlights that we want to point out is that we are just over 100% collected in dues. We are still tracking down about 6 towns that we just need, who haven't indicated that they don't want to participate. But we pretty much do this every year where we're trying to track down some of the smaller communities at the very end. Sponsor donation is up. Part of that is due to some sponsors from our sponsorship program runs on a calendar year as opposed to a fiscal year. Some of the sponsors from last year were invoiced after July 1st, so within this fiscal year, so all of their sponsorship will be recognized in this fiscal year. That is part of the reason for the increase. The other reason is I'd like to give a shout out to Katie Harley, our events and strategic partnership coordinator. She's brought in several new sponsors this year. So as live events, I know we've talked about before that she did a great job, and we did really great having our sponsors stick with us through the pandemic when our live events went down. Now with live events coming up, we've got people coming to us wanting to sponsor our organization. So we're very happy with that. Another thing to mention in revenue is, if you remember a few months back, our ARPA assessment, we've collected on that. The way we will be recognizing that is it is booked as a liability. As we spend the money, the revenue will be recognized in the correct fiscal year. So this assessment spans over a few years. So you will see that actually getting spent down now. Overall in expenditures, this report has 2/3 of the year under it, and we are just under 2/3, 61%. Overall looking very good. A couple items that you will notice on here that are over are related to, or over or close to being over, we anticipate being over, are related to those live events coming back online. When we budgeted for this, we were looking at what things had been previously, and a lot of those costs have gone up. Food and beverage costs, facility rental costs are going up. A lot of that may have to do with folks trying to recoup after a downtime of not having any live events. You'll see in this memo mentioned a couple of times that we will be bringing to you an amended budget in April. And that's a line item that will be addressed in that amended budget, just to get it back on track to what events are actually going to cost us. Additionally, in expenditures, you'll notice we're right on track with personnel. However, we just want the board to be aware that we'll likely have a change in that in our budget amendment we'll bring in April due to the increased bandwidth that we had legislatively via contract labor and the addition of our deputy director position, which is right here. If you're right in front of me, it's like a blind spot. It's weird that way. Overall, we are $831,431.04 revenues over expenditures at this point in time. As you know, we collect all of our dues in the beginning of the year, so we'll see that number come down as our expenditures continue to go. Does anyone have any questions on the financial or the budget report section? And then I can get to the check register.
Be talking to, I mean, do you want us to reach out to the 6 or 8 cities that?
Just make sure. Ogden paid their dues, so, yeah, otherwise both you and Mayor Caldwell would have gotten phone. But the question from Councilmember White, Councilmember Marsha White, not to confuse with Councilmember Dustin White, who's online, is whether board members can help in the outreach with the remaining 6 towns that we anticipate or we expect to pay dues this fiscal year, but have not yet. At this point, no, because our staff has been following up with these towns, and these are towns that are open 2 hours a month. So it may be something where we need to just drive to the town hall during one of those 2 hours and have a conversation with the clerk. What's interesting though, is a year ago, when this board adopted a minimum dues amount for towns, we were concerned that there might be towns who would withhold their membership in the league because their dues amounts would go from $200, which was the average town's dues before, to $500 this year. We've only had one town who proactively reached out to us and said, we're not paying dues this year because we think that increase from $200 to $500 was outrageous. And we've tried to follow up with that town, and we'll continue to follow up with that town. So there may be a time where we'll follow up with our elected officials off the Wasatch Front, because that's where these towns are located, to see if maybe they can help. We also are following up as part of our outreach plan this spring with all of our associations of governments. And in fact, speaking of outreach plan, Mayor Ramsey, if I may, this spreadsheet in really small print, as it goes on to a couple of pages. Yeah, Mayor, sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. We just printed that, the biggest paper
Yeah.
we could get it to print on.
But this is part of the effort that we are undertaking as staff in coordination with Mayor Ramsey and her team, is to be able to get out on the road this spring and summer and meet with as many of our communities as possible where they are. In fact, that's why for the first time in my career, we're having a board meeting at City Hall of a city as opposed to at the league offices or at the Capitol or at the trust, because we'd like to make sure that the league is actually out in the communities and not just the other side of a screen. So Mayor Silvestrini, Mayor Kafusi, you two are both on notice that next year and the following year as presidential cities, we'll hold a board meeting in your cities. So get your public safety building built quickly. Mayor Silvestrini, get your city hall built quickly. Yeah, for both Provo and Mill Creek have massive buildings underway. Mass is probably not the right word to say, but both have important and historic, yes, modest, modest and appropriate city buildings underway that could host this meeting. But anyway, this outreach is also designed to make sure we're hitting those towns that we may have, and I'll be completely candid from my perspective. I mean, I used to be able to go around the state and I knew somebody in every community. I can't say that now because of the last two election cycles and because we had the COVID interruption where we were doing everything remote, or we just didn't get out on the road as much as we did before. So that Mayor Ramsey's made that her presidential ambition for the next few months, is to get out to as many of those events as possible. That's why we're coordinating with the associations of government in order to piggyback on their events. And anyway, yeah, this is the master list that Angela on our team has been putting together of events in the next couple of months that we as league staff, along with Mayor Ramsey, will be trying to attend. And it's not just off the Wasatch Front, but it's also, oh, I see Mayor Lenhart asking about Bear Lake. Yeah, as soon as it warms up, Mayor, I am there. So
Oh, I want to come to Bear Lake. Did you organize one in Bear in Garden City?
Bonus, I didn't even consider that.
Right. But to that point, the request we have for the board, we're going to mention this in a sec, but Mayor, I'll just do it now. The request we have for the board is make sure that league staff knows when you are holding regional events that we could piggyback on. So for example, Mayor Kafusi does a mayor's huddle every month. Isaac and Kay invited me to that last month. I thought it was great. It was awesome to be able to just listen to the mayors and provide some feedback after the session. Mayor Daines, I know that you have your Saturday night events with the Conference of Mayors. So and we have that on the calendar because we reached out to get that information. So as you're having these events around the state and in your regions, COGS, COMs, AOGs, make sure we know so we can add it to our master outreach calendar and figure out our best approach to get there.
Great.
So I'm gonna hijack you one more time, Nick.
No worries.
You know, this goes to the budget amendment thing that you're gonna be bringing forward with respect to compensation or staff issues. But, you know, first of all, we haven't talked about this, but the league staff did a fantastic job representing our communities at the legislature this past session. And frankly, their bandwidth was expanded because of some additional staff that we added. We had Liam, who was kind of hired for do something different with respect to ARPA. And we have an associate director. I don't know what, I apologize if I got the title wrong, but you know, the fact of it is, the thing that I saw is that it was so valuable to have that extra bandwidth for staff, and it was so necessary. We wouldn't have been able to do the kinds of things that we were able to do because we had that staff. So So it's critical, and I think when we get to that amendment, it will be supported. I also just want to say in response to what Councilmember Marshall White said is, we may not need anybody to dun communities for their dues, but it is important that we as board members, spread the love about the league with other communities so that they actually get an idea and appreciate what it is that this organization does for our communities on the Hill and otherwise. So every opportunity you get to do that, I would speak out, and I'm really encouraged to hear that we're going to do this tour, and I want to be part of that. When we were doing the nominating committee for the board members in the fall convention, one of the things that I heard from members of that committee is that, hey, we never hear about the league out in the basin. We need to have you guys out there, and they're willing to organize a confab of communities out there that would be able to come and talk to officers. But I think that's a really important outreach. So thank you.
Thank you. That's the goal. All of us here in this room are well aware of what the league's doing. Not all of our colleagues are, and we can't always get to everyone, right? So we're going to do the best we can to go try and listen and understand where they're coming from and the mindset of these elected officials, and then also do some educating and help them understand some things too. That's the goal. So, go ahead.
Great, thank you. Were there any more questions about the budget report portion here? Okay, great. You'll see we also have the check register, the longest, most interesting document in the packet. One of those statements is true. As you can see, these are all the checks that we have cut during the period that this report covers. Each time we get checks signed, a portion of that is reviewed and approved by Cameron and by Mayor Hales as well. So if you do have any questions on any of the particular expenditures on here, I have all of our paper checks here with us, so I can go in and answer any questions that we may have. If not, yes, we're gonna have to extend the meeting just a little bit longer, but the only reason we do bring this entire document before the whole board is because it is a best practice from a few years ago that the legislative auditor brought forth for every entity. Our policy was before to just keep that within our finance team. It is a little bit of the nuts and bolts, maybe a little too detailed for everyone, but we do want to bring that forward. So we're checking every box as far as financial transparency and best practices required by the auditor. So any questions on those? If not, we would be ready for a motion to approve both the report and the check register.
Dustin White, Roosevelt City, move to approve.
Okay. We'll give the motion to Mayor Silvestrini and the second to Dustin White, and I'm not sure who is keeping track of these minutes. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, any discussion, questions? Anybody want to see every paper check? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving.
Aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed? Thank you. Okay, did you have a question you were going to address right now? Okay.
Mayor Lenhart, saw your comment in the chat room. Angela on our team has the list because she's been dutifully following up with emails and phone calls to those communities that have not yet paid. So we can follow up with you afterward about who they are. In fact, we'll reach out to each board member who represents an area where we have outstanding dues and see if we can tag team that way to follow up and get that done. The goal in the April board meeting, in many ways, today's meeting is a foundational meeting financially, policy-wise, et cetera, for that April board meeting, because you'll be setting the dues in April. And we want to make sure we get everything resolved from this fiscal year so it doesn't get confused into the next fiscal year for those communities. So our goal is to have all that wrapped up by the April board meeting in 3 weeks.
Thank you. Okay, very quickly, I want to welcome Todd Godfrey, who's here with us too. He's not sitting at the table, but Todd, it's nice to have you here with us. Thank you so much. And also, I want to go outside of our schedule ever so slightly and have you jump to the very end to the right at 9 where it says adjourn. Underneath there in red, we have our next meeting. Okay, so our next meeting is actually scheduled to fall on Juneteenth, which, oh, I'm sorry, the June meeting, right. The June meeting is scheduled to fall on Juneteenth. That now is a federal and a state recognized holiday, and we would propose that we move that up a week to June 13th, Monday, June 13th. And that's the meeting where we'll be adopting our fiscal year 23 budget. Does anyone have a problem with that, moving that off of the 19th and moving it up to the 13th? Is that okay? Okay. Do I need a motion for that, or can we just schedule it? All right, we will ratify that and make it official with part of the later business. But before, we just don't want to lose people and not have people be aware of that or give any input. So if you guys are okay with that, we'll make that, we'll formalize that in a little bit. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Next, advocacy and engagement update. We're going to turn it to Cam and to Justin Lee, and we're going to do a review of the session and a preview of the interim. And there's plenty to talk about, so take it away.
Terrific. Thank you, Mayor Ramsey. And again, thank you to everybody, not just for being here today, but thank you for your contributions during the legislative session. We want to take a few minutes to recap what happened in the session, but really spend the bulk of the time setting the foundation for the interim. Consider this part one. At the April board meeting in St. George, we'll do a deeper dive on the different topics. So this is really more of the brainstorming, and then the April and May meetings will be the prioritizing, okay? So first, it's important to recognize where we've come from before we can start talking about where we go. And I'm going to share a conversation. I'm not going to say who said it, and forgive the terminology, especially in light of an actual war taking place in the world right now. But on the last night of the session, I had a senior official approach me up at the Capitol and said, "Hey, I just wanted to give kudos to your team." And I said, "Well, why is that?" And he said that cities had quote unquote guns to your head this session, but you didn't get shot. And then he listed the other groups that did get shot during the session. But he said, really, you as cities did really well this legislative session. And then we talked further, and I had several other people who made similar comments over the last couple of days of the legislative session. So when you think about where we were a few months ago, where we were as league staff, the fact that half of our legislative staff was gone for most of the interim last year as we were filling it, I am just incredibly proud of our legislative team, Justin Lee and his efforts as the Director of Government Relations, and every single member of our team, both those who are in-house and those who are on contract, for all of the contributions behind the scenes and in person over the course of the legislative session. Justin will talk a little bit more in detail about specifics, but I just wanted to say thank you to all of them, and thank you to our home team who kept the trains going on time and handled all of the operations while much of league staff was dedicated to legislative advocacy. So Mayor Ramsey, if it's all right, just a round of applause for the legislative team.
Can I also say thank you and ask you to pass along gratitude to all of the members of your own staff who also, not officially as part of league staff, but we all know that when you're part of this organization, our staff steps up to help and get engaged, and they're engaged more than everyone. They really are. They do a great deal. Also, please thank them for us for all of their contribution.
City managers, we had a lot more reach because we had their help. So.
So thank you.
Yeah, we refer to them, and some of them are in this room right now, from Isaac to Rachel to Ryan and others, but we refer to them as our extended family for a reason, because we see more of them than we see of our own families during the legislative session. And so thank you for that. in your packet, you'll see a couple of documents, which will be our attempt over the next 5 or so minutes to essentially grade ourselves on how the legislative session went. So first, you'll see a document that Carson Eilers, our senior analyst, presented to this board in November. I have only added what is in orange to it, okay? So it's up on the screen and it's in your packets. So what we added in orange is another category where we essentially said, here's what the league members prioritized in our LPC survey that over 100 people submitted back in August of 2021. And here were the outcomes. And what you'll see in this document is within that very comfortable section, we accomplished almost every item that league members had prioritized in the growth space. In the somewhat comfortable space, we accomplished items or there was no change, which in many ways for the league, no change is good change. There's a good outcome. The middle category, same thing. We've made some progress and then there were no negative changes. And then certainly when you get to the somewhat concerning and the very concerning piece, the reason no change is highlighted in orange is there is our folks said these areas were very concerning or somewhat concerning, and we successfully fought off those types of bills. Every item that was in this survey at one time or another was under consideration for legislation in 2021. And so as we reviewed these results, we felt that this was a really good marker and an indication of the success we had in the legislative session. It's not to say we won on everything because we didn't, but what it says is the league members prioritized these proactive issues, and then they prioritized these lines in the sand, and we were successful on both counts. Now, one of the questions that we've highlighted in bold on the board agenda that we'll come back to is this very number one item: organize a coordinated communications and public outreach effort around growth challenges and opportunities. That was by far the number one item from the LPC growth survey. The legislature appropriated our exact request that this board made. And now the question is, what does success look like from that effort? And in fact, I have my first stakeholder meeting at 3 o'clock today on this effort. So that's why it'd be helpful to get feedback from this board before that first meeting at 3 o'clock. The second item that is in your board packet in this space is staff's version of minutes from when Representative Waldrop met with this board on the second day of the legislative session. So we spent 90 minutes, which is unheard of with a legislator during the session. And Representative Waldrop outlined what he thought the key questions were. He described his goals for the 2022 session, and he described what he'd like to look at in 2023. Meanwhile, you as board members responded with key provisions you wanted him to consider as part of his dialogue around housing and growth and land use. So again, you can see in section B that we've listed the items that were done, partially done, or done differently. So on a positive note, on the done side, we heard loud and clear from you and from your colleagues that we need better data around what's actually happening in the housing space. And so there's now a new dedicated staffer at DWS, and our staff has already met with this dedicated staffer a couple of times since the session ended. Engaging the general public about growth. I mentioned that got funded. SB 34 plus, with the bones of which came from us, was implemented in House Bill 462. On IADUs, we were preempted on internal ADU impact fees. But the conversation about IADUs will continue in 2023. And then I want to draw your attention to what I've described as done differently. Because that first, Mayor Silvestrini's laughing because he had just as many sleepless nights on this as we did as staff. But Representative Waldrop presented a concept the first week of the session that, if it had gone the wrong way, could have looked like state takeover of land use authority around state transportation corridors. And this is not a new concept. In fact, actually, I'm looking around the room and it is new for most people in the room. But in 2016, the Transportation Task Force considered this very thing and we fought it off then. But we were able over the course of the session, and when I say we, it's a global we. So Mountain Land Association of Governments, Wasatch Front Regional Council, league officers, UTA, UDOT, Representative Waldrop, developers, et cetera, to pivot the conversation around station area plans and House Bill 462, which became a consensus bill, as opposed to a state override bill. Likewise, with House Bill 151, the retail incentives bill, this board spent a lot of time working through retail incentives in the fall, and we ultimately got to a place that our folks could live with. Not to say we got everything we asked for, but we got to a place we could live with on that bill. So again, as we look back on what happened in 2022 in the housing and growth spaces, we as staff feel very satisfied that the league board and league membership gave us direction, and we were able to fulfill that direction to a high degree. Justin, I'll turn it over to you to talk about water issues and the other general issues.
So this is what I want to talk about to the board and the membership. You know, when we started this legislative session, that there was a theme that was being put out. I think I can't attribute it to. It was coming from leadership. It was coming from a lot of people. It was, we need to give the locals cover. We need to basically take their local authority away from them to the point where they can just tell the residents of their municipalities that, well, we have to do this because the legislature is making us do it and giving us political cover. And while there were some areas where we made some compromises and bit our tongue on some things where there were invasions of our local control, by and large, though, we did blunt that movement to give us political cover. And we did time and time again, either kill bills or modify bills that were otherwise designed to do exactly that, taking away of local control. So, you know, while this is like frustrating, and I don't know how Cam and the staff kind of like do this year after year, because sometimes it's like, you know, Groundhog Day about fighting for local control, but at least it was successful this time. And the one thing that I noticed, at least having been up there for not forever, but, you know, 4 or 5 years at this point, is this is the first time that I really felt like we were getting the opportunity to affect policy before it got written into draft legislation. We were being listened to help design, and we were clearly, tap dancing around difficult issues and to some extent fighting a rearguard action and talking about unintended consequences of what was being proposed. But we were successful, at least in being involved in the policy room, both on the governor's side and on the legislative side. And I really want to give credit to Representative Waldrop, Representative Schultz, President Adams and Speaker Wilson. They were all at least in the mood to have us in the room and talk to us, rather than just coming up with ideas that this is the way it's going to be. So.
Thank you.
Nick, so I made Nick put together like a slide deck of a whole 2 slides instead of writing a memo. But let's talk about water really quick first. The first slide shows the governor's water priorities. And this is a slide that we've shown at LPC a couple of times. And if you remember the governor's State of the State address, he covered all of these and said, there are bills coming out on these different subjects. We want these to pass. And so we didn't have a gun to our head. We maybe had a water gun to our head on these ones, if we had any water to waste on such things. But this was an area where we were also effective at knowing there was legislation coming, knowing this legislation was going to pass, but steering each of them in a way that was as favorable to cities as possible. So, for example, HB 121, that was Spend Love's bill. And we were able to say, hey, how about you take out that part about cities on there? We're already dealing with it in other bills, and he pulled it right out. So it wasn't a bill we had to worry about anymore. SB 242, secondary water metering. I know there's still some opposition to that bill, but end of the day, we got the very best deal we could have out of that one and made sure the funding was there. $200 million is one of the highest appropriations I've ever seen for a single line item. So that was a big deal. And then SB 110, this was a bill that we brought out, that we found sponsors for, and actually helped us with the other water bills, because we were taking a proactive approach to one of the issues the governor wanted to look at, the legislators wanted to look at, and that helped us to stop some of the other legislation that was less favorable. And for example, SB 282, which was Wilcox's bill, that we originally opposed and then ended up going in favor of because he wrote the entire bill in a way that we asked him to do, the mesh with what we were doing. So a lot of water bills, they were definitely going to pass, but we did it in such a way that we got the best deal we could have out of all of them. So really, really good job. And huge thanks to some of the cities. Gary Hill was in on these. Ogden City was deeply involved. Mark Stratford, who's left Ogden, but so many city people who were right in the middle of these helped enormously. And I didn't put Utah Lake Authority on here, Isaac, but also a huge one that, again, we got the best deal we could have given what was happening. Nick, if you want to jump to the next slide. And just run through a few other ULCT wins here. Public safety, we got HB 399 through. We had our members reach out. This was a big one. They heard from, legislators heard from our members, and that certainly helped that. We only got 3 no votes during the whole process, despite the media being opposed to this and reporters running around on the Hill, basically lobbying against it in the form of interview questions, which was fascinating. SB 190, this clarified use of cannabis for public safety. We didn't win the fight on one of the bills, but we're able to get this in another bill. Other problematic bills that ended up dying. HB 239, this was a government entity budget transparency bill. This one was just great to watch. Speaking of the extended family, reached out to the extended family, reached out to some lobbyists that represent cities, and watched this thing just die beautifully on the floor. Kate, do you have something on that one? Sorry, council member.
That's Kate's fine. I feel like I have to add some color commentary on HB 239. So some of my color commentary I can't say in an open and public meeting often.
That's called colorful commentary.
Yeah, more colorful commentary. On HB 239, I thought the call to action was fantastic that went out. And the email string of people reporting back was just great as they did their assignments. My friends at the Taxpayers Association, and they are my friends, they were very dismayed. They really liked this bill when it failed. They had called out Representative Ray Ward, who's one of Bountiful's legislators, and were giving him a hard time about his no vote on the bill. And it just happened to be as I was walking by. And he said, well, I voted no because my city told me to. And he said, talk to Kate about it. And so then we had a back and forth about why, what they were doing was kind of a ridiculous overreach. But the Taxpayers Association was absolutely dismayed. They thought it was just fine and thought it was going to glide through, only to watch it absolutely crash and burn. An excellent example of the League Army doing their assignments. So that's the color commentary.
It was beautiful. And yeah, getting all the reports back was just great. I sent out the email and just watched everybody reporting back. Yep, talk to this person, talk to this person, talk to this person. It was great. Enjoyed that one far too much. HB 85 didn't enjoy quite as much because it drug out a little farther. Huge shout out to Mayor Silvestrini on this one. He came up to the committee meeting, brought, I don't even know how big that example board was. It was like 6 foot by 7 foot or something. It was huge.
I did talk to Representative Dunnigan, who's the chair of the committee, about letting me have it in there, but it worked. And then there were many cards and letters on that bill. And so it's great that cities can still acquire park space as our population grows and we densify.
And I'll say the interesting thing, well, and I'll say this, HB 269, another one that was just not a good bill. It would have cost cities an enormous amount of money for very little effect there. And after some opposition in committee meeting and talking with the sponsor, he amended on the floor and got through the last night of the session. And it's incredibly innocuous at this point. But all these bills were examples where we talked to legislators, we had meetings with legislators. They just said no to various levels of colorful no's on those ones. And then the league came out and the Army did their job and stuff went down. So just huge thank you to everyone that responded. It was very effective. And then the bill tracker, our bill tracker worked very, very well this year. I don't really have anything to compare it against because I haven't been here for previous sessions, but based on what I heard from previous years, it was very, very effective. And I would have people just run up and grab me and say, why are you opposed to this bill? Why are you in favor of this bill? And I'm like, where are you hearing that? We haven't even talked about that in LPC. And they were looking at the bill tracker. So the bill tracker was incredibly effective of getting information out there about where we were on bills without us saying anything. So I saw one bill in committee where a legislator popped up and says, well, I heard the league's against this. I'm reading it right here on their tracker. Why don't they like it? And then the bill died in committee. So just great job to everybody who helped us out. Again, the extended family is huge. Shout out, but we met with the city managers every Friday, and thank you for loaning staff to us as part of that league army and helping out with the extended family. We absolutely could not do this alone, and it's just phenomenal to have that group of people around.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn to Gary Hill, and he has a question online.
Just a comment, Mayor, if I can add maybe two more heartening wins that I've noticed. The first is a small one, but I think a term that we coined here around the table of legislation by anecdote, I have noticed being discussed more and more. I think that's really valuable, that people recognize that in the absence of data, that's what we're left with. And so I like that that's being picked up around the halls at the Capitol. And I think a second much bigger win is I have noticed articles and public dialogue more and more this year, especially at the end of the session, about whether or not our legislators believe in local control. I think they're getting called out on that. And so I'm very heartened by a broader public discussion of those principles. And I think that's something we ought to be aware of and continue to push.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate that.
No, I don't know if we had a slot on it, Cam, where we want to talk about what's coming up politically, or if now's the time to do it.
So
Talk about what's coming next.
Yeah, before we do that, let's just do a quick update on ARPA. We wanted to give Liam a chance to explain to the board the outreach that he's been doing with the ARPA, voluntary ARPA assessment that cities have paid. So Liam, we'll take 1 minute to do that, and then we are going to pivot to what comes next and get your feedback on our initial priority list.
Okay, awesome. All right, just to be brief here, I wanted to point out a few things. The first thing was the local match grant. It was originally done by GOPV last year. It got funded this year, but moved over to the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity. It's 25 million. As you can see, they have some qualifiers on there to be able to apply for that. All municipalities are eligible. They only cut out first and second class counties. They have to be used for housing or water. And you would also be ineligible if you have a lot of unprogrammed ARPA dollars, or if you use revenue replacement after February 1st. So that'll be something to pay attention to, because I know with the new rules, a lot of cities are moving to using the revenue replacement for most, if not all, of their ARPA dollars. They just had something brief on there, and NLC had a lot of good conversations with other cities around the country and how they're using their dollars. A lot of them are doing the revenue replacement as well, but they're also using a lot for broadband. And I think that will be something that comes up a lot more still with the governor's office and other places. So that'll be something to look out for. And then as I'm moving forward between now and mid-year, I am planning on calling all the cities that have paid the voluntary ARPA assessment. So be on the lookout for a call or email or something from me, just to reach out and see how it's going and if I can help you out with anything. As always, just feel free to reach out to me if I can do anything for you.
Perfect. Thank you, Liam. We created Liam's position based on discussions with this board a year ago about the need for ARPA technical assistance. And I've bragged about Liam to other state leagues, because right now Vermont and Alaska are the only other two state leagues I know of that have hired ARPA dedicated staff. So when we were at NLC earlier this month, I met with about 30 league directors, explained what Liam was trying to do. I'm putting him in touch with Alaska and Vermont so they can coordinate best practices of what's been happening there. And then we assigned him during the session to track all state ARPA dollars that could benefit local governments, so he could be eyes on the ground there. And then you heard his pitch earlier on the boards and commissions piece. What we're trying to do with Liam's position, because it's the first time we really have this additional staffer here, is to really bolster that engagement side in the policy team. So boards and commissions, outreach, et cetera, and while staying true to the ARPA mission. And we are, how many times do you think you've read the guidance now, the final rule, Liam?
More times than anyone should have to.
Well, thank you. He's answered countless questions for me, let alone all the questions. He's tracking every call and every email that comes in so that we can be accountable back to them. Gary, I'll just put a pitch to you that as part of UCMA next month, we'll want to make sure Liam has a few minutes to do a similar update so the city managers hear how those dollars are being spent too.
I wonder how the board would feel about adding another task to Liam's plate and seeing if he couldn't schedule a field trip for the board to Alaska and Vermont, just to, see how they're spending their ARPA dollars. Just saying. Kidding. This is a public, I'm kidding, but yeah, anyway, it's a great idea.
So, perfect. Well, okay, now let's, this is kind of the good foundation about where we've been. So the next question now is where are we going to go? Again, this is part one. We'll have a deeper discussion in April and finish it up in May as we work through the process. To set this up though, I've asked Rachel Terry to give a quick moment or a quick update on what happened at the Davis County Republican Convention on Saturday, because I think it foreshadows what is on tap for us. Rachel?
I could tell Kate's got commentary.
Yeah, so, and I'll leave the colorful commentary in my head till we're offline. And happy to share the colorful part later, but I'll just share the kind of substantive. Mayor Tran was there. She helped with elections. So did Liam. Kate was there as a delegate. Mayor Shepherd was there as a candidate, so they can fill in any gaps. So I'll just briefly share. The reason I'm sharing it is I was the chair of the convention, so I got to see all the angles and sides of the convention and where the delegates were, where the candidates were, the results of it. And the long and short is that we'd anticipated following the caucus night that the results for the elections would skew more right, on that whole axis of politics that you see, skew more right than they'd previously. But they trended more right than we'd even predicted. The incumbents did not do well. For example, Representative Handy lost. He only got 30% of the votes. And there are candidates who are overtly anti-government who did well at the convention. And so there was a lot of rhetoric, both from candidates and feedback from delegates themselves being very anti-government. And the way I'd sort of narrated it in a short sentence to Justin and Cameron was COVID broke America. And you all know that in your cities. Manti's representative had just shared with me how she's seeing that in her own city council meetings. And so I think it's relevant to what cities are doing because the sentiment, you're seeing it already in your cities. We're going to see it on the statewide level. The people who are going to be making it out of conventions and now into primaries or are just the going to be the de facto candidate on the ballot are in some ways are different than where we've been before. And I think we need to be prepared for that in how we message and how we engage with our citizens and how we look at our own programming so that we can be prepared to have those conversations both in your city councils, amongst the mayors and also as a league and how we want to help you as you navigate sort of this angrier new world.
Thank you, Rachel. The Davis, Cache, and Weber County Republican conventions were Saturday. There are more conventions to come over the next month, and the state conventions for both parties are on April 23rd, and then the primary is 2 months later. So we really have this 3-month window for a bunch of candidates, most of whom do not have any sort of city experience, for cities to start building relationships when we know candidates are going to, well, we hope candidates will pay attention to mayors and council members. So that's going to be a major focus at mid-year, is helping equip our members through the city's work effort we started last year on how to build relationships with these candidates, because many of them are blank slates when it comes to local government. Now, with that being said, we want to take the next 20 minutes or so and start the discussion about what we want to accomplish during the interim in anticipation of the 2023 session. So with Rachel's framing of kind of what the legislature could look like in January, in your packet, you'll see the initial list that we as staff have collected. And I use that word intentionally because these are ideas that came up during the session or we heard about from cities saying, hey, we really ought to look at this in the interim. This is not a prioritized list. This is the start of a brainstorm. And what we intend to do over the next few weeks is to send this list out to our members and solicit their feedback on potential additional items. So this list may have 22 items today, it may have 50 items by mid-spring. And then we intend to ask our members to identify their top number, maybe a top 10. So then you force Cameron City to essentially prioritize the political capital. So these are the 10 that Cameron City thinks the league should do. Then we'll gather that input and bring it back to you as a board to ultimately do the prioritization later this spring. So the first question for the board to consider is if there are any items that are not yet on this list that you want to be on the list for consideration. Mayor Ramsey, I'm just going to kind of put a pin in that one because that's something that you can bring up in a second. The second question, we had highlighted a couple of policy discussion questions in bold. We're not going to have time for the doing your part on moderate income housing piece yet. That one we'll save for April. But for success on the public engagement process, especially in light of what you're seeing at City Hall, we're seeing with legislators, I'd like some general feedback from this group before I sit down in that first steering committee meeting at 3 today of what does success look like for a statewide public engagement dialogue around growth. So Mayor, I'm combining those two for purposes of time, but if people have specific topics they'd like to add to this initial list, please speak up. Or if you want to give your thoughts on what does success look like with this $1 million, and it's going to be $1 million, there are going to be other groups contributing to it. So it's going to be far larger than $1 million. But what does success look like from the public engagement effort?
And to be clear, we had to expend a lot of political capital as a league to get that $1 million funded, both the league and Wasatch Front Regional Council to get that $1 million because we had to fight to get it brought back. But everybody in this room and online knows how important this conversation is, right? Okay, so do you have a copy of this list in front of you? Is there anything that you don't see on here blaringly that you're like, what do we need to add? Is there anything?
I think you're going to see external ADUs come up.
External ADUs. Anything else?
And Mayor, to be clear, we'll be sending this out too. So this isn't your only chance to chime in, but if there are things on the top of your mind, like, hey, we really ought to take a look at X. And we also have our longstanding policy resolutions in our policy platform. So for example, longstanding policy is to preserve our sales tax formula. So we don't need to write that down. We've got that one in the bag. Roger's trained me well. Nick, you said you had somebody online? Gary.
Thanks. 2 items. One is not strictly legislative, but is what I would consider legislative adjacent. Is that fair, Kate? To coin your term?
Yes.
The state auditor just issued an audit guideline that would require cities to account for development fees separately from all other fees and track if we have quote unquote excess expenditure, excess revenues, that these would then would be considered restricted. This is something that was considered in legislation 2 years ago, I think now, Cam, if I remember right.
Correct, 409.
And was not adopted, that now is becoming codified through the state legislator's office, not even through the administrative rule process, but through the audit guideline. This isn't something I think that as elected officials, you're maybe aware of yet, but there's quite a bit of talk going around right now between the city managers and finance directors and others about this. I think we need to talk about development fees. This is all an effort to, I think, pin cities down in our authority. And so I would like to add that on to something we can talk about. And if I may, in the short term, we only have 30 days to comment on this proposed rule. And I'm wondering if Mayor Ramsey and Cam, if you would both, what your thoughts would be if the managers were able to work with ULCT to come up with a joint maybe understanding of what that rule does and possibly a position. Is that something we could consider? I don't want to.
I'm supportive of that idea. Do you have any concerns, Cam, about that?
Not at all. Gary, you said 30 days. Do you know when the deadline is?
We all received the notice, I think, on last Thursday. I don't have the date in front of me, Cam, but the clock's ticking. So we're probably down to 3 weeks.
Okay.
So.
And Gary, I think there needs to, I don't know if the city attorneys need to get involved in this as well, but I think there needs to be some pushback here. This is a legislative thing initiative by the auditor. This isn't accounting stuff. This is putting more burden on municipalities and establishing requirements that are not set forth in state law. And I don't think there's a basis for the auditor to do that.
Mayor Silvestrini, I couldn't have said it better. In our opinion, those of us that talk, we think this is actually illegal legislation coming from the auditor's office and may ultimately result in a lawsuit from cities or others. Looking ahead, I'm not sure how else we're going to be able to put a stake in the ground that what's happening is legislation out of that office. But I think to begin with, what I would like to see happen is all of the professional associations in the next couple of weeks, their leadership groups getting together and having a joint statement. And that would be the attorneys, it would be the finance directors, the clerk auditors in the counties, possibly the independent auditors as well. But I didn't want to commit staff resources without the board and without, of course, Cameron's feelings on that.
So can we have a discussion with the auditor about this? I mean, that may be more effective to have a conversation about this rather than writing a letter, but just to talk about what's going on with this and what's the authority for doing it.
Yeah, my personal opinion is yes, that would be useful, but we did last year. This is the second time. Last year, he actually required this of all of our independent auditors, all of whom declined to a little bit broader version of this guideline. All of them declined to write our cities up for this because they could not find the statutory authority to do it, but it hasn't stopped him from trying to refine this a little bit and require it. So I don't want to take up a lot of the board's time, but this is a big issue that has many of us on the administrative side, our legal and finance folks included, very concerned.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary.
And then
so in light of that, that's a little bit different than what we were asking for. I think there's power in a motion directing league staff to work with the other affiliate organizations, recognizing the clock is ticking before this board will meet again and we could report back in April.
Can I get a motion to that? I'm very supportive of that. Okay.
I'll make that motion or second.
The motion, go ahead. I'll let you say it.
The motion would be to give league staff direction to explore and oppose any move by the auditors to require municipalities to report development fees or account for them, and to work with other agencies and organizations to formulate a joint response.
Second.
Okay, any discussion to the motion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Gary, thank you for bringing
Mayor,
that to our attention. Yes.
and
go ahead.
one other quick topic to add to our list, which is legislation. And This is growth adjacent, but it has to do with our cemeteries. Many of us for years have, many of us that have cemeteries have a number of plots that people buy that get passed on from generation to generation, that 3 generations after they were purchased, the families don't even know they own anymore. The state law stipulates the process by which we can reclaim and reuse those, and it is extremely onerous. If any of you have ever tried to do that, the process is nigh impossible. Almost everybody gives up and just tries to buy more cemetery land. I would really like to see if we could proactively work on some legislation that would help extend the lives of our cemeteries, so to speak.
That bill sounds dead already.
This is a grave issue.
Terrific. Thank you, Gary. Other thoughts about items to add to the list for now?
I have one.
Or how to define success on the public engagement efforts and direction for me as I sit down at 3 o'clock at the steering committee. We do have a comment from Mayor Monson. Please.
Those online can see it in the chat. Mayor Monson said. Thank you. Mayor Monson has said, in regards to possible issues or hot topics, I can see more issues / discussions in regards to HB 11 and that topic. I do think it will drive more talking points related to mental health and suicide awareness.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Monson.
Okay. Mayor Silvestrini just noticed the surprise. We've ordered several hot tubs that we're just going to let you just hop in if you want after. No, look at that. There's a whole truck full of hot tubs right there out the window. It's like, what? That's awesome. Okay. That's not actually from us either, but I do have one that I think it's something that we are going to be involved probably in the conversation as we were this last time. We know there's going to be additional discussion on homeless resource centers and the city's roles and where they go and how there's going to be a lot with that I think we just need to be, I still don't see it. Oh, homeless. Yeah. Okay. Well, rest of state, it's on there. I did not see homeless. Yep. Okay, good. It's on there because it needs to be. That's good. Thanks.
Yeah. So just again, you're going to see a survey later this week. We're going to try to spend the first little bit of April soliciting this type of feedback from the members broadly. Then we'll bring back a larger list to start prioritizing and be able to build work groups off of that list. And there may be some issues that we take on as league priorities. There may be other issues that is a issue that's really important to South Jordan, that South Jordan will take the lead on, that the league will support, but we won't lead out on it. So we're trying to build the master list so that we can allocate staff resources accordingly.
I just want to talk about direction about the statewide growth conversation. There are 2 things that I think should definitely be addressed. And one is to push out, information to our residents that at least 2/3 or thereabouts of this growth is internal. It's our own kids and grandkids. So we're not dealing with some alien force here. We're trying to find housing so that our children who want to live in Utah can continue to do that in an affordable way. The second thing that I think needs to be addressed, because that we're walking kind of this fine line, and sometimes people are accusing us really of like a mixed message, because we're talking about the need to provide housing and and sometimes more dense housing, but we're also asking people to conserve water. And so we're getting a lot of comments about why are we adding housing when there isn't enough water, and that there's a needle to be threaded on that conversation about how we use water, and that there actually is enough water for people to drink, and we can still grow and do that. It's just water is being wasted otherwise. So that's got to be a focus of this conversation on growth.
Thank you. And we'll be at that table. That conversation is going to be led really by the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget and the state planner, Laura Hansen. has been kind of tasked with that, but we'll certainly be at that table. But we're successful in finally getting that conversation to happen. It's been driven by the league for a long time. It's been asked for by the league for a long time. So I think we've made good inroads there, progress. Somebody raised their hand. Kate, was it you?
Yes, I have another suggested topic. Fireworks. I received my, I know. I received my first email today from a resident in regards to the drought, asking, when I was going to vote to ban fireworks. And I got to explain that I don't have the ability to do that. But the legislature does.
Well, they say we do.
Until you do, and then they tell you you can't. So, yeah. So anyway, I think that you should add that to the list.
Other thoughts on the public engagement process? What does success look like? What do people want to make sure that I bring up in the stakeholder meetings, again, that start at 3 o'clock today?
I know Envision Utah is going to be part of the conversation, and they can probably have some ideas also on what success looks like, right? As we have conversation, just regarding the growth conversation specifically, but.
Sure. I guess here's the struggle that I have as I sit in these meetings. We can all identify the problems. We can all identify the frustrations that residents have about growth. And we were successful this year at finally getting state leaders to acknowledge that this conversation has to be at the hearts and minds level of residents. The unanswered question is still, where do we actually go from here? Because I think if you just run a glitzy campaign, you're not actually meeting people in their hearts and minds. So then what does it mean to meet people in their hearts and minds? And that's going to look different, Mayor Ramsey, in your neck of the woods, than it does Mayor Tran in Kaysville, than it does in Clearfield up the road. So that's, today's not the end all be all on this piece, but we really do want, I want to be able to go into these meetings and reflect your thoughts as league board members, not just the thoughts of league staff as we're talking about these things. Because at the end of the day, you're the ones who actually put your names on the line to run for office, and you're the ones who are dealing with angry phone calls related to growth. Or you're also dealing with the people who are saying, we love living in Logan City, we love living in Mapleton, we want to keep these places special. So how do we make sure we keep these places special, either in spite of or because of the growth? So if you don't have an answer today for me, that's okay. Just know that these steering committee meetings are going to be happening a couple of times a month. So feel free to reach out as individual board members, and know that in April, when we're in St. George, we're going to be doing a deeper dive on these two key questions. And today was hopefully to kind of get the brainstorming going, so you're prepared in 3 weeks. Likewise, go back to your cities and talk to your fellow electeds about these questions too, and talk to the cities in your region as well, so that you're prepared for that April board meeting. Any final thoughts on either additional topics to add or what success looks like on the hearts and minds of Utahns around growth? Okay, Nick, I don't see any hands. Okay. Perfect. In that case, Mayor, let me jump to item number 6. And the first item on the agenda is the organizational goals. Now, as we were putting these together and I looked around the board, there are not many faces left from the 2019 board, which is the last time we did a goal setting exercise as a board. We adopted these goals in October of 2019. COVID struck 6 months later, and the world was fundamentally different. We've taken time as staff over the last few weeks, and we're not done. So let me make that perfectly clear. We're not done as staff with the evaluation process, because half of our staff is different today than it was in October of 2019. But this is just a quick snapshot in your board packet where we've highlighted in green where we think we've hit the mark, either because it's completed or where we are completing it. Yellow, where we feel like we've started, but we haven't quite hit the mark yet, or red, we just haven't started at all. We as staff we spent about 4 hours going through these the week after the session, and then we'll be doing a follow-up. And our goal is to bring amended goals to you for your consideration in April and May, again, as part of the budget process. So like we know what our goals are, so we can allocate our finite financial resources accordingly. So this piece is not for discussion today, but again, if you as a board member have any questions about it, any follow-up questions, let us know, and we'll be coming back with amended goals for you to consider. You know, some of these are internal to the organization, but some are external, which is where you as board members are really, really valuable in making sure we're meeting the needs of the membership as you represent them. Any questions on the goals and the report on the goals that the board set in the fall of 2019? Okay. I believe the only board members who are still on the league board were of the officers, Mayor Silverstein. It was, I think all 5 officers were here, and then Mayor Mendenhall, and that's a pregnant and. So out of a 21-member board, Councilmember White, were you on the board? Councilmember Dustin White, were you on the board in October 2019?
Yes, I was.
Okay, so you were so 7 of the 21 were on the board then. So 2/3 of the board has turned over in 2.5 years. So part of the fun, right? Yeah. Okay. So then let me then talk through the dues process, because this is the decision you make as a board in April that is instrumental to everything we do as an organization. And obviously every city and town pays very close attention to it. In your packet, Nick and I prepared a memo that outlines some quick history about the league dues. You can just look at, yep, perfect. The dues formula consists of these 3 categories, these 3 factors: property valuation in your city, population of your city, sales tax receipts in your city. I became director in October of 2017.
2017.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. Yeah, because that was the day I took over was the day that Roger stepped down. So you can tell that's like fixed in his mind as he got some of his life back when he stepped down as interim director. But in that year that Roger did the budget, and then all the budgets that I've done since, we have not made any adjustments to the rates as they apply to those 3 categories of property valuation, population, and sales tax. When Roger took over as interim director, and then as I took over as director, our financial reporting was really poor. That was in part what led to the audit, the state auditor's audit, and the forensic audit before that. And it was like we could not answer basic questions about how much we spent on personnel, how much we spent on conferences, where money was coming from, et cetera. So it took a couple of years of Roger, Carrie Nakamura, Nick, me, our outside financial consultant, Dave Sanderson, to really kind of midstream start figuring out what the budget ought to look like year in and year out. So that 2 years we were building up to that, and then COVID hit. And again, most of you are new, but in that COVID board meeting from 2 years ago, the board initially looked at cutting dues by 20%, ultimately decided just to freeze dues for that year. And then last year, the board voted to unfreeze the dues and let the formula run. And we instituted a 1-year lag in the data collection on those 3 points. So as we have been, we now can answer questions for you about how much money we dedicate for conferences, how much money we dedicate for personnel, how much in operations, et cetera, et cetera. And we've tried to be very transparent about all those pieces. There is a potential natural increase in the dues if you adopt the rates as they are. Because if Riverton's population increases, then Riverton's contribution to the league goes up proportionally. Just like if Roosevelt's population decreases, Roosevelt's contribution to the league goes down. And so we see that year in, year out. Some pay more, some pay less, depending on these three factors. So if we just run the rates as they currently are, keep them constant, we would project that projected dues would increase 6.9% next fiscal year over this current fiscal year. So on the aggregate, it's about $140,000. So the 6.9%, like this is really the only place we have growth in our budget for operations and personnel. Yeah, well, it's not even quite cost of living, right? Unfortunately. So that's the first piece. The second policy question we have for this group, our recommendation is you keep that baseline option. You just continue to let the formula run as is. You have a natural increase of 6.9%. We can now tell you that dues cover about 90% of our operations and personnel costs. Okay, and that also includes the one-time ARPA assessment. So we put that into the dues category because that's helping pay for operations and personnel. So that remaining 10% of operations and personnel is offset by conference-related revenue. And as Nick indicated, Katie did a remarkable job. And one of the strategic goals that the board set forward in October 2019 was essentially to hire Katie, and she's delivered in spades because we kept all of our sponsors despite not doing in-person events for a year. So we have this one-time pool of money that we're using this fiscal year, and we're able to use into next fiscal year of sponsor money that didn't go toward paying for conferences. Well, at some point that one-time money runs out. And so from a structural perspective, we think it makes sense over the long term to have membership dues cover personnel and operations, which again, right now is about 90%. So there are a couple of ways you can approach that. One, you could say right now, we want to just increase those rates to cover the 100%. Another option, what we've listed in the memo as adjustment option 2, would be you phase that in over time to kind of inch toward that 100%. So you'd have the natural increase plus a slight adjustment over a period of time. Or you just stick with the baseline option and recognize that we'll always have a little bit of a structural shortfall there that we have to cover in the short term with the one-time money, long term with conferences, grants, or other things. So as we are working on a budget and to bring back to you in April and May, we need a direction from the board of whether to prepare dues for your consideration based on what we've listed as the baseline option, or whether you want us to look at baseline option plus potential adjustments on that 90 to 100%, and then whether that's a one-time adjustment or kind of phased in over a period of time. Again, you're not adopting any dues today, so you could give us direction to prepare documents today and then ultimately decide to do something else in April, but we just want your general policy direction of what to prepare between now and your consideration in April.
A lot of our municipalities are going to be under some significant pressure this year, particularly given the cost of living increase, as well as the amounts that a lot of communities have had to spend, at least in Salt Lake County, with respect to wages for public safety officers. So I don't think that trying to jump to that in one piece makes sense. I think that will shock the system enough that it might even I'd be concerned about maintaining the membership of the organization at the level that we want to see, which is 100%, right? So I personally, I think I'd prefer to give direction to try. I don't think your idea is bad, especially given the fact that we're supporting some of our staff that we need with the ARPA contribution. So I don't have a problem with trying to phase that in to get to 100% over time, but I think that's probably a better approach, in my opinion.
So other thoughts from the group, and we're just looking for direction so we can bring you specific dollar amounts to consider. And you'll have in your board packet prior to mid-year, proposed dues for every city, town, and state. So those of you who you'll be able to actually look at every city and town, say like, this is what the aggregate amount is, increase, natural increase, et cetera. So we just need to know what the general direction is from the board. If it's simply the baseline option, great. If it's baseline option with adjustment option 2 for consideration, great. We just need to know what to prepare so we can consider it.
I would agree with Mayor Silvestrini as far as the impact that this will have this year on our cities that who are, budget, just personnel alone is killer this year. Our budget increased 1.4 million for our wage analysis. So I would agree with the long term of, yes, at some point we do need to start getting this back, but I don't know that it's necessarily bad to have 90% of it being covered by dues and the other being made up. Unless, of course, we base things on South Jordan because they're, as Don said, they're going up every day. And so if we just use their
Based on that formula,
population.
we're going to be paying, it's going to go up every day.
Yeah, I think they should just pay a new amount every month and cover their own.
Well, and Mayor Shepherd.
Can we pay some of our dues? I don't even know who owns those hot tubs, but
So Mayor Shepherd, your point is a good one, but we're facing the same pressure for our personnel costs too, right? And we have been trying over the last couple of years to get our staff positions to a point where they are competitive so that we can both recruit and retain quality employees. Like, I'm very proud of the staff that we built, and we had to rebuild a huge chunk of it last year, in part because our salaries weren't where they needed to be and because of the workload. So we've been trying to expand the staff so we can spread the workload and make sure we're paying competitively. So it's the same, we're all facing those same pressures. And I'm curious, there's an email going around the city manager listserv that we're planning to aggregate, help them aggregate to see how different cities are approaching it. If people are doing 8% COLAs, or people doing 2% COLAs, or kind of how people are handling it. And every city is doing a little bit differently, but we're facing those same pressures.
yes, please, Mary, council member.
Perfect. Yeah, no, thank you, council members. So the question is, how many years have we had this structural piece? I've asked Nick to go back and try to piece that together pre-us, and it's just hard to do because the data is so inconsistent prior to Roger becoming the interim executive director.
I'm not sure we ever hit 100%, but
no, it was much lower, and
yeah,
there was a second entity that the league would pull money from in order to kind of make the budget work. And that second entity was also part of the audit, and that entity no longer exists.
Basically, it was a separate fund that was part of our problem, but basically it was paying for personnel costs.
Right. So we've been trying to take an all of the above approach on our budget. So our budget has increased since I've been director. It's increased each year by ballpark $150,000 to $200,000, in part because of Katie's efforts on sponsors. We have more sponsors today than we've ever had before. So we've been trying to get to this equilibrium of what does conference-related revenue pay for? What does dues pay for? Or what do dues pay for? COVID gave us this really interesting snapshot that conferences went away. And if conferences never came back, what would the organization look like? So right now, the shortfall is about 100,000, but the good news is, at least in the short term, we have one-time money that helps defray that structural issue. Over the long term, I'm hesitant to use one-time money to pay for personnel, at least ongoing personnel costs, maybe for contracts, but for ongoing personnel costs. So that's the balance. And that's why, in light of everybody's inflationary challenges right now, we wanted to ask the question. Certainly over the last few years, this structure has existed. COVID just helped us highlight it.
Thank you. So my comments to Cam the first time we discussed this were very similar to what Mayor Silvestrini said. with the budgetary constraints that we're facing, is it terrible for us to be at 90%? It's taken a lot of work to even reach the point where our dues cover 90%. We're there. Is that terrible if the extra 10% isn't made up with dues? And if it is, if that's not really comfortable in the long term, I don't want to see a big all at once. Okay, it's going to actually cost everyone this much more to make up that 10%, because I think we'll lose cities. I think cities will go, yeah, it doesn't matter how great you are, we can't afford this, and we'll lose cities. So at worst case scenario, I'd like to ease that in. Best case scenario, keep it 90 and keep dues at 90. What are your thoughts? And I mean, worst case from a financial standpoint, from a city's financial standpoint, not an overall, you know.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we, Kaysville, we're small, so we have budgetary problems as well. And we're trying to figure out how to make money work. But at the same time, I think that the league is such an important and influential advocate for cities that I would rather see the time being spent doing legislation than fundraising. And so I'd be in favor of option 3 or option C, to increase it just a little bit, in addition to what it would normally just, annually increase, to try to make it up, that difference. Because I think that you should be able to fund 100% of your personnel and payroll costs with dues. I mean, it's a benefit for the city, and I would much rather see the time spent legislation on legislation. So.
Thank you. I'll just throw out one comment. Your revenue on conferences and events is 19%. The operating expenses are 28% on conferences. I mean, do you think it's critical that the league does 2 conferences a year? I mean, have you ever thought of going back to 1? I don't know. I'm just asking those questions.
Sure. So we did. When I became director, that was one of the conversations we had. We actually did 3 conferences and we scaled it back to 2. And part of the reason we scaled it to 2, but not to 1, was we heard from sponsors that 3rd conference they didn't really care about, but the 2 conferences they did. So if you scaled back from 2 conferences to 1, it would certainly save staff bandwidth, but the sponsor revenue would go down considerably as well. And we did an analysis of all the sponsor revenue and conference related revenue with about 30 state leagues around the country. And we actually charge our sponsors more than almost any other league, in part because we have those 2. And even if you broke it down on about a per conference basis, for example, in a lot of leagues, their top level sponsorship is $10,000. Our top level sponsorship is $50,000. So that allows us to get the higher profile speakers because we have that bigger pool of money. So part of it is us now coming out of COVID, making sure we've got the right alignment of our conference costs and what we're spending money on. And we cut the entertainment from our annual convention, didn't seem to affect attendance, saved us a considerable amount of money. So that's in part why I'm bringing this up to the board now, because if ultimately in April you decide, let's just stick with a natural increase and not an adjustment, we could prepare 2 different things for you to look at. And if you choose that one, then we know going forward that we need to keep looking for ways to kind of cut back the conference related costs. So hopefully that, Mayor Daines, helps answer the question.
Thank you.
What if we
We got Mayor Walker.
what if we went to 95% as our target goal, 95%, then you fundraise the rest? We just set it at 95% and phase it in 2 years.
Yeah, we could certainly do that. That's really the policy call. If ultimately Mayor Walker, Mayor Tran, if the board says this is the target where we want to be as a policy, this is where we want the league director to meet this goal with the understanding that we fundraise the rest to cover that. Great, we can set that as a policy, and then we know year over year as we set our goals and set our budgets how those pieces fit in.
I mean, I'd like to see it get to 95% and have 5% be the fundraising, simply because it gives you the stability. You can probably get the 5% without a whole lot of trouble, and we can raise our sponsorship up to 60,000 because it's so awesome. And then, but I mean, I agree with Mayor Tran. The cities can say I can't afford it, but they really can't not afford it because like the analogy of the gun to the head, I don't think they've put all their guns away. I think they still have guns. And they might be getting more bullets, but they're not going to stop with the constant attack on municipal government power and ability to manage our cities and, create our communities. So, I mean, I think my view, well, maybe I'm alone, but 95% would be what I'd like to see the target be. If you can raise more, great. And you can, the more you can raise, the better. But if we could get it to 95%, I think that'd be really stable.
Maybe in 2 years, maybe give us a plan that shows us getting there in over a 2-year period. We have somebody online.
I think Gary. I cannot read.
He did have a. Read it off. I'll read Gary's comment here. Gary says the general consensus of city managers 6 months ago was that it was worth higher fees to have more legislative / staff bandwidth.
I agree with you, Mayor. I think we should put a time frame, not just over several years, but
I agree that it should be a time, 2 years, 3 years, because every year that we don't collect it takes more to catch up. And so, if we say 2 years or 3 years, I agree with you, setting that several years.
And I'll make a
timeframe.
motion to give staff direction to prepare options for our meeting in April, I guess, that show an option A is that to keep the dues schedule the way it is now with the natural increase. And option 2 would be to move us to 95% in a 2-year time period.
Okay, any discussion of that motion?
Address. So Mayor Capuzzi asked for hard numbers, and the answer is absolutely yes. So the week before mid-year, you'll get a board packet that, if this motion passes, will outline the 2 different options and then what it means for each city and town in the state. And so that way you can look at it not just for your own cities, but look at it in the aggregate. And then you adopt the dues in April, and then we finish putting the budget together in May. As Nick mentioned, we lost our Finance and Audit Committee with the election in November. So right now we've got Mayor Hales. So this is another great opportunity if you want to serve on the Finance Audit Committee to work with us and the officers over the next few weeks as we're putting these details together. The last piece I'll add is the still outstanding question of the membership of metro townships. So in Salt Lake County, Kearns, Magna, White City, Immigration Township, and Copperton are not league members because previously, when they incorporated as metro townships, they were still pretty tied to the county. We had them come present during COVID. It was a virtual only meeting, and they were asking for 2 things. They were asking for authorization of the franchise tax, which up to that point was only available to cities and towns, and they were asking for membership within the league. The board at the time voted to not oppose them seeking the franchise tax and decided to punt the question of metro township membership. And so from a staff, then Roger became the general counsel.
Yeah, I was going to say, I presented a memo to the board under my interpretation of the Constitution and the law. They are eligible for membership. They just haven't asked yet.
Yeah. And we anticipate at least Kearns and Magna asking to become members, which then obviously would go into a dues formula.
I move that we look at including them as for membership, the ones that want to join. And then I move that you try and find that secret fund if you can. Again.
That secret fund built the office.
Yeah, way too many scars, Mayor Walker. Way too many scars. On the Metro Township piece, let's take a vote on that motion, and then I'm going to ask for a second motion on metros.
Yeah, because yes, I feel the same way about metros, but there are some strong politics that go along with that. Some really strong politics. We've got some larger municipalities who do not want the townships that they are joining. It's interesting. So at this point, if there's no other discussion, I will call the question and ask for a vote on the motion that's on the table to bring A, keeping it as it is, right, the schedule as it is, and B, taking us to 95% over 2 years. All in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, ayes have it. All right, townships, I'll let you say what you want to say.
Yeah, this will be quick. We request a couple of board members who are willing to sit down with league staff and a couple of the larger cities that are not members of the league board, but have brought up concerns with metro townships in the past, to have a conversation in the next couple of weeks about the potential membership of the metro townships within the league. I don't want to get out in front and say, yes, we should, no, we shouldn't, until we've had that meeting, but I would like to have a couple of board members, don't have to necessarily even be from Salt Lake County, but who are willing to spend an hour with a couple of cities and the metro township folks to have that discussion between now and the end of April. So
Can I ask Cameron, is it helpful to have the conversations be with people from Salt Lake County? Or does it take some of the tension out if it's people who are outside Salt Lake County?
I think it's helpful to have both. A board member
Bear in mind,
from Salt Lake County.
Metros only exist in Salt Lake County, but so it's a political issue, not a legal issue.
Right. But I think it's both. So I'd welcome a handful of board members who are willing to take an hour in the next month to sit down and hash this out.
So to Councilmember Bradshaw's point, I think it might be useful to have somebody with a perspective outside of Salt Lake County that won't come with some of the baggage that is here. These are municipalities, Medina and Kearns are larger than many municipalities that are members of the league. And they, but I think that outside perspective would be useful if you're interested in being there on that. I don't know who the communities are. I've kind of already said my position on this, that I think that they're legitimate, but, and they should be members, but, and so maybe I shouldn't be on that committee.
Well, and we may not get as much political pushback as has existed in the past. We're just not sure.
I've talked to the cities. I don't think it's quite at the level it was before, but I do want to emphasize, if they want to ask, I think our Constitution requires that they be admitted. I think it's a question they held off asking. So we were comfortable.
All right, I'm in my motion to look at it. There you go.
Okay, so we have a motion to look at this with the understanding that we need 3 or 4 people who are actually willing to spend an hour over the next month. Or a couple hours.
So Mayor
Okay.
Walker, Councilmember McKay. Just because.
I'm happy to if you need me. If you don't need me, great. And do we have anybody outside of the Wasatch Front willing to participate? I'm sorry, Salt Lake County. Yeah.
This is Julie Fulmer. I can do it if nobody is responding.
Thank you, Mayor.
I assume I'll be the staff link on this, and I'll make sure my memo's sent out to everybody because it was done 6 months ago.
Okay. Oh, okay. Do we need to vote on a motion now that we have on the table? Okay.
Your motion now is just to look at the issue.
But we're good, Raj. Let's jump to the closed session. We got everything we need.
Yeah.
We can finish the rest.
I'll make a motion that we reschedule our June meeting
A week earlier?
to June 13th, so it doesn't conflict with Juneteenth.
And then add Juneteenth to our holidays or not?
And to add Juneteenth as a holiday for league staff.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion to that? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of moving June meeting up to June 13th this year and making Juneteenth a holiday, officially a holiday as part of recognized by the league for our staff, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Be
Okay.
free, league staff. Be free.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I appreciate it. I am going to now ask for a motion to move us into a closed session to discuss the character and competency of an individual. Can I please get a motion? Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Carson, we have a motion by Mayor Shepherd and we have, oh, I'm not sure who's taking the notes, or Nick. Mayor Shepherd, and then a second by Councilmember McKay. I'm not going to do a roll call. I'm going to ask all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed, please indicate. Okay, for this closed session, we need members of the board. And,
Everybody
and
else
Nick,
needs to,
Nick will stay with us.
and I will be here.
Thank you.
For those of us joining online, you will see in the chat, there is a new Zoom meeting with the meeting ID and passcode that we'd ask you to jump on and join that meeting. I will be taking care of the tech here. Once people fill in for that meeting, we'll be switching you out and we will go from there. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, hang on just a second, just so we can say that over again, because this is not, looks like my mic is wrong. Oh, okay, I'm gonna have to close too many things right here. I am going to close this in meeting for all. That will give me access to the microphone here. Yes. Phone, come on. Excellent. Okay, move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you so much. Thanks, you guys.